Today we're going to be talking about verifications pre-HOTMA. So it's important to remember what we verify. In affordable housing, we are going to verify everything. We're going to verify household composition, things like dates of birth, names, social security numbers. We're going to verify financial information, income, assets, expenses. And we're also going to verify any other eligibility factors. So citizenship, disability status, if it's relevant, need for an adapted unit, and anything else that is key to whether or not someone is eligible for the project and program. Some things to remember about calculations and verifications. For Social Security, remember to use the gross amount, including the pennies. If you're talking about a move-in, you're going to be looking at an award letter rather than EIV, and it's going to have pennies listed on it. Make sure that you include those in your calculations until you get the number that's going to go on the 5-9. The only time you're going to adjust that number is if there is a recapture for an overpayment. With employment, make sure you're looking at the most recent 4 to 6 pay stubs, and you want them consecutive. For bank accounts, remember with a checking, you're going to look at the 6 most recent bank statements. In some cases, you may need to use 5 plus the starting balance, but any way you look at it, you need 6 most recent amounts. And you're going to look at the most recent for a savings. For self-certifications, you're going to document any attempts to get the other types of verification. So you're going to include information that you attempted to get a third party, but you couldn't, or you asked the tenant for copies of something and they didn't have any before you go to a self-certification. Make sure that if they are signing something, they put their signature and their date on it. And it's always a good idea to advise them of the penalties for fraud. One thing you should be handing out to everyone when you're doing the interviews and the research is the fraud is it worth it handout. So make sure that they've been given that and that you have documentation that they've been given that. With tax returns, you want to get what they actually submitted to the IRS. So you want to know that that's the copy that was submitted, and it's a good idea to ask them to sign and date the copy that they gave you. It's really important in our business to dot the I's and cross the T's. Review the applications thoroughly when they're submitted and again before you interview them to make sure that everything that you had a question on, every source of income, all of the things they disclosed are accounted for in that interview and that everything is verified. Be sure to ask the applicants about any inconsistencies in their application. If on their application they disclosed employment income and when you're doing the interview they don't disclose employment income, you want to make sure to ask about that. Do they have proof that they stopped employment? You want to make sure that you can prove that you asked all of the questions that you're supposed to be asking and document those responses in writing. Document, document, document. We say that all the time in this business. You're going to make sure that you're documenting certain things in particular. Anytime anything is outside of the normal routine, a new job with only 2 pay stubs because they just started, any documentation that the applicant still needs to provide you, make sure you document what they need to bring you and the deadline that you gave them. Anything that is inconsistent should be verified. You want to know that if they said one thing on the application and another thing at interview, that you looked into that and then take notes as to what the outcome was. You also want to document that you provided them with the information they're supposed to receive. Things like how your rent is determined, is fraud worth it, the EIV handout. Most managers handle this with an acknowledgement. Make sure that if you're using an acknowledgement that it is signed and dated. So what makes good documentation? First of all, especially if you're doing like a third party by phone, you want to make sure you include the date, the time, and the contact person. You want to include all relevant details, have the signature or the initials of staff. When you're talking about copies, make sure those copies clearly show dates. For instance, the date that you received it, the period of time that it covers. Make sure that you're getting signatures of applicants when they're necessary. So if I have a self-certification, I want to make sure that my applicant is signing and dating that, so that if that information turns out to be false, I have a record of who provided me that information and on what date. Make sure that your documentation is within the acceptable time frame, 120-day time frame. And your documentation should be clearly understandable by anybody who looks at the file, both for MOR purposes and in case anybody else is coming in to cover, say you're on vacation. You want to make sure that anybody can look at that file and follow what happened. There are some resources that you should be aware of when you're talking about verifications. The HUD 4350.3, Chapter 3, the HUD 4350.3, Chapter 5, and then Appendix 3. Appendix 3 is that list that shows all of the different verification forms. So it'll say for age, you can accept this. For social security number, you can accept that. Goes through just about everything you're going to need to verify and what is acceptable. You can find the 4350.3 on HUD clips. So as always, we would love to hear from you as far as what you'd like to see on the next Tuesday tips. You can contact us at our email addresses. You can reach out to Vicki or to me, and we would love to know what you'd like to see next. That's going to do it for today. We'll see you on the next Tuesday tips.